Many years ago, when I was still living in New York, I attended a Christmas service led by my friend, Pastor John. I was really eager for him to get to the sermon because it was a big year. We still felt the effect of September 11th, invasion to Afghanistan. People were talking about weapon of mass destruction. Should we start an Iraq war? Remember these times? Pastor John starts talking, and the first thing he says was a question. He said, "Do you know what's the real meaning of Christmas?" I'm not an authority in that. And he didn't really wait for me or anyone to answer. He said, "Christmas really means spreading the good word. Spreading the word of Jesus." And he continued with a beautiful message about all the nice teachings of Jesus. And I couldn't believe. Not a word about wars, about tension, about terrorism, nothing. And I knew that it would never have worked out well for me in a synagogue. First of all, because it would be really weird when a rabbi talks about Christmas on Rosh Hashanah. But mainly because, Jews want to hear about serious stuff. Right? You have anti-Semitism. We have conflicts in the Middle East. We have so many things. But as I was trying to put all the sermons that I had originally prepared for the high holidays, and you can trust me this year, it was not hard to find sermon topics. I recalled Pastor John, and I was thinking to myself, maybe he was onto something. Especially for me, because we were always laughing because Pastor John prepared one sermon for Christmas that he gave 4 times because he had 4 identical services. We have to prepare 4 sermons that each one we give only once. So I was thinking maybe in order to usher this really difficult year, it wouldn't be a bad idea to start with some good words. After all, we have a very important principle in Judaism that we don't like to pay attention to. It's called hakarat hatov, recognition of the good. We like to kvetch, right? To complain more, but it's fine. But hakarat hatov is really important. But what is tov? What was good this year? The theme that we chose, Temple Beth chose for this coming year, is taken from the Mishnah, from about almost 2,000 years ago, when the Mishnah says, "Da me'ain bata ve'le'an ata olech." In order to be a serious person, a serious Jew, you first have to know minayin bata, where you came from and where you are going. So tonight I'm going to talk about where we came from, or in other words, I'm going to share with you what I believe to be the 7 most important contributions of the Jewish people to the world. These are not just simple gifts. Some of these things today we take for granted, but we brought them to the world that did not exist before us. And why 7? Only because it's a nice Jewish number. You can make other lists and include other things. Number 1, ethical monotheism. It's not just monotheism, belief in one God, but ethical monotheism. The idea is that this one God expects us to follow a universal moral code. God wants us to be good, not just to know that God is one. You take it for granted, right? It wasn't the case before. And the most important lesson from the beginning of the Bible, from the Torah, is Vayivra Elohim et ha'adam betzalmo, and God created humankind in the divine image, creating it in the image of God, creating them male and female. Each human being was created in the image of God. This is the foundations of the idea of equality, the idea that we all have value in the sight of God. This is big. And from there, we go to number 2, freedom. What is the biggest story in the whole Bible? The Exodus. Right? We're slaves and God freed us. Slavery is bad. And why is that? Because if God created all of us, it makes no sense for some people to own other people, for some countries to oppress others. Now, the Exodus story is not just for us Jews to talk about during Passover. It inspired dozens of societies, of social movements. This is part of our American history. You know, when the patriots, those who wanted to separate from England, it was not so easy to convince everyone that they were right. I read many documents in which they used the Bible, they used this idea. For them, King George III was Pharaoh. The British Army were the Egyptians. Who was Moses? George Washington. Okay? The Atlantic Sea was the Red Sea in the Exodus story. What they were conveying was that freedom from England is not just a good political idea, it's actually what God wanted them to do, and if they do what God wanted them to do, God will make them successful. Worked out quite well. But this is a fundamental Jewish principle. And where can you find this beautiful verse? Philly people? Liberty Bell. Okay? Proclaim liberty throughout all the land. If you go and see this semi-broken bell, that's what you see. Number 3, since we're free and we're equal, democratization of literacy, of education. You see, the Jews, 2,000 years before anyone else, said that every person has the right, if not the obligation, to be educated. Back then, the only people who could read were the priests and the kings. Nobody else. It's much easier to control illiterate people, but not for the Jews. We just said it in Hebrew and in English, right? It's from the Shema. Teach them to your children, recite them when you stay at home and when you're away, when you lie down and when you get up. It's an obligation for every parent to educate their children. That's why education is so important to the Jews and has been forever. It became part of our DNA. At the year of 75 BCE, some 2,100 years ago, Rabbi Simeon ben Shattach said that every child starting at the age of 6 must be educated. And at 64 CE, Ben Gamla instituted schools in each and every district. Really 2,000 years before people started to do it in the Western world. And more than that, even poor kids who cannot afford tuition have to study. And that became the obligation of the community to find the funds with which to educate them. Because we're all equal. We all deserve education. But now when you're educated, and that's something super Jewish, we love to debate. We established a culture of debate in a good way. It's called machloket l'shem shamayim, debate for the sake of heaven. The Talmud, the edition that I have in my study, has 72 volumes. You can just imagine how much is written in the Talmud is filled with debates. That rabbi said that, the other disagreed, this dissent. They were hardly interested in the final solution. They love this debate. And that's why we established this critical thinking. We love to question, we like to dissent. Can we see the next verse? This is a beautiful story when God went to Abraham and said, Abraham, I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because they are wicked people. What did Abraham say? Abraham came forward to God and said, will you sweep away the innocent along with the guilty? Said, God, no, you cannot do it. And they started debating. That has been our tradition. That's why sometimes it's hard to raise Jewish kids, because they like to argue back all the... But this is what we brought to the world, and I'll talk much more about it tomorrow when I'm talking about colleges. Remember it. This is who we are. This is part of the culture. And the next one is peoplehood. See, people often ask me, I don't understand, they say. The Arabs have 22 countries. There's a tiny Israel. Why can't they take care of the Palestinians? And I try to explain to them that they don't think like us. They don't have the sense of peoplehood that we have. What do I mean by that? For us, we're all connected. All the Jews around the world have this connection. How many of you yesterday couldn't take a breath around 12:30 when you heard that missiles were coming from Iran to Israel? Not only those of us who have families there, but oh my God, our Jews were being attacked. How many of you worked in order to release the Russian Jews, the refuseniks? When we heard that the Jews in Ethiopia, none of you has ever heard about Jews in Ethiopia before. But when they were in trouble, there was an amazing collaboration between the State of Israel and the American Jews to release them from Ethiopia and to bring them to Israel. This is a sense of peoplehood that we take for granted. But this is ours. And in this country, in America, we took it one step forward with hyphenation. Because the Jews came and said, we're not just Jews, we're not just Americans, we are Jewish Americans or American Jews. Again, today we take it for granted. We talk about African Americans and Asian Americans, but it started with the Jews. The Jews said, we don't need to choose. We can be perfectly good Jews and perfectly good, loyal Americans, hence the hyphen. We brought it to this country, to this culture. You know, Napoleon told the Jews, yeah, you can have full rights, but you have to tone down your Jewishness, either French or Jewish. Not here in America. We're Jewish and American. The next thing, oh, I didn't see that doesn't matter. The next thing, yeah, no, I have a timer there, so I know when The same gift that we gave the world is the idea of messianism, not in the way that you think, but in what we refer to as tikkun olam, the idea that we are not satisfied with the status quo of the world and that we have to do something about it. We look around and said, that's not good. Too many wars, too much violence, too many diseases, too much poverty. This is not good. I had a teacher, some of you may have heard of him, Arthur Hertzberg, who said that, there's a very small difference between Jews and Christians. Both of us believe that the Messiah will come. Only that for the Christians, it will be the second coming of the Messiah, and for the Jews, the first coming of the Messiah. But there is something really big about the idea that the Messiah has not yet come, because when the Messiah comes, it means that the world will turn into paradise. We cannot argue that the world is paradise. And therefore, it is our obligation to do what we can together with God in order to repair the world. Because we believe that the world can be a better place. It's not yet. It can be, it should be, when we and God work together. And the last thing is hope. What is the anthem of the State of Israel? Hatikva, which means hope. I don't believe that there were nations that suffered as much as we did. But no matter what, we never lost hope. But here's a definition of hope that I'm using. It's a definition of Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. He asked, what's the difference between optimism and hope? Optimism means, I believe things will be good or better. Hope means that if I do the right thing, and are the people with me, then things may be good. To sit and pray, no, that's not hope. But to do what we can, and prayer can be part of it. I'm here in the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah. I'm not saying prayer is bad. But we don't just sit and hope and ask God to do our work. We believe that if we do what we need to do, things will be better. And these are, my friends, tremendous gifts. Of course, they were filtered by other religions, other cultures, but the world would have been a completely different place, much worse, in my opinion, without these 7 gifts. Let's just look at them again. Ethical monotheism. We were created in the image of God. We should all be free. Freedom also means freedom to think, to question, to disagree. Universal literacy. Education does not belong only to the elite. Everyone has the right. Arguments for the sake of heaven. A culture of debate. Peoplehood. All Israel are responsible for each other. Tikkun olam. The world is far from being perfect. Up to us. Not to finish the work, but to do all that we can. And hope. Even at the end of a year like that. So my friends, these are the good words that I chose to share with you tonight. It's the beginning of learning where we came from. And with these gifts, I think we can start planning where we will be going. Shana Tova.